here and thanking you for attending our state convention. We very much appreciate your presence and your continual activism. My name is Walter Hudson, and for those of you who watch House of Cards, you may be interested in knowing that I ascended to the rank of Vice Chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus without a single vote cast by me. When our previous chair, Greg O'Connor, stepped down to attend to other things, I was appointed by the board to fill that vacancy, and you'll have an opportunity to correct that if you wish later today. Since then, I've been working closely with Neil to craft a new vision for what the Republican Liberty Caucus can be here in Minnesota. The Minnesota chapter of the RLC is already a standout amongst the national organization. We are the sole chapter nationally that stands as an official affiliate of the state party. And that is status that comes with both pros and cons. One of the pros is that we are certified in terms of the legitimacy of our organization. And by that I mean that there are several requirements that party affiliates have to meet and maintain in order to retain their affiliate status. And the RLC happens to be among the more active and compliant of the MNGOP affiliates. But we don't have to be bound by what has come before. One of the great aspects of the RLC in Minnesota is that our chapter has some of the most creative and effective minds that the Liberty movement has to offer. I'm particularly enthusiastic about the appointment in recent months of Carl Eggers to the board. Some of you may recognize him as the aid coordinator of Liberty Minnesota. While it may seem odd coming from a competing Liberty organization, I have no trouble acknowledging that Liberty Minnesota has been the pathfinder in the Liberty movement here in our state. And that success motivates us to join them in finding innovative ways to advance the cause of liberty in the years to come. I want to spend some time talking about ways that we can do that, but first let's commiserate a little bit regarding just how steep our movement's uphill climb is going to be. The typical examples of government overreach that are cited in a speech like this one generally come from the federal government and state government. And certainly living in Minnesota under the administration of Mark Dayton, while Barack Obama holds the White House, there are plenty of examples that we could choose from of individual rights being violated. However, in order to understand just how pervasive government assaults against liberty are, I think we really need to drill down to the local level. We need to take a look at the culture within our own cities, our own towns, and our own neighborhoods to soberly evaluate just how little individual rights are upheld close to home. And it's kind of ironic that in Neil's remarks, he mentioned speaking to a high-level Republican activist who said, "Oh, you libertarian folks, you're great for local government, right? You're great for city and county government, but your ideas don't apply at the state level and the federal level." Well, I'll tell you what, with the status quo, they don't really apply to local government either. I'll offer two examples, both having to do with zoning. The first you may have heard of recently. KSTP reported on it, and it's been making the rounds on social media. A man by the name of John Von Glan sought to open a tattoo parlor in Anoka. He had every intention of complying with the dictates of local government and was told by city officials that he had a green light. Von Glan proceeded to invest over $10,000 into this shop, which was all that he and his wife had, with the expectation that he was going to be able to open his doors and start seeing all of the appointments that have been made in the interim. Then, late last month, Mr. Von Glan went back to the city to obtain a signage permit, because we have to have permits to put signs in front of our businesses, right? And it was at that time that he was informed by Anoka's planning director that someone had made a terrible mistake. The lot where Von Glan had invested in good faith was not actually zoned for a tattoo parlor, and he would not be allowed to open his business. The nature of city government is such that despite the clear damage done to Von Glan and his wife, there's nothing that can really be done about the situation immediately. KSTP reports that the plan is to provide some kind of settlement for the couple, but they will not be allowed to open their business. The second example comes from my backyard. This past year, I had the honor of being elected to the City Council in Albertville, which is a town that sits along I-94 on the northeast corner of Wright County. And Wright County, as you may be aware, has a well-deserved reputation for being among the most conservative counties in Minnesota. If there's anywhere that you would expect individual rights to be respected in this state, it would be in Wright County. Earlier this month, the first controversial issue of my term came before us, the proposed rezoning of a commercial lot to allow a church to be built in Albertville. The lot in question has been vacant since it was first zoned for commercial purposes back in 1998. For those counting, that's 17 years of an empty lot, 17 years of stagnation. The property owner wanted to sell, the church wanted to buy, but ultimately their request for rezoning was denied on a 3-2 vote. The reason cited by those opposed to the plan was preserving the tax base. In other words, it was deemed more important to collect future taxes from the property for local government than for local government to uphold the property rights and respect the market in this situation. I offer these examples to demonstrate that even close to home, and even in the most conservative communities, there are many ways in which individual liberty is curtailed. As true believers in the rights of men, viewing such incidents can be awfully discouraging, as Neil spoke to when he talked about apathy. How do you, in one moment, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and declare fealty to liberty and justice for all, and then in the next minute, vote that a guy can't open a business, vote that a community can't build a church? There's a huge cultural disconnect between the rhetoric of liberty and its practical application in our politics. It's a problem that everyone in this room clearly sees, otherwise you wouldn't be here. The question before us then is, how do we fix the problem? Ultimately, we need a society that embraces the philosophy of liberty. We need an electorate that embraces reason as its means with dealing with reality. Absent that, we need a committed minority of activists willing to do the political work required to stem the tide of tyranny. And that's where the Republican Liberty Caucus comes in. Earlier, I alluded to the pros and cons of being an affiliate of the Republican Party of Minnesota. One of the cons is that we're obligated to support, or at least not actively oppose, endorsed Republican candidates. But I can speak generally about what we might call opportunities for improvement within the Republican Party. There's an ongoing debate amongst liberty activists over whether or not the Republican Party is the appropriate vehicle to pursue libertarian policy. My position on that should be evident from my association with the RLC. I maintain that the Republican Party remains the best hope we have for positive political policy change. We can debate the merits of a two-party system, but for better or worse, it's the system we have. And if we want to field viable candidates, which seems to me to be the only means by which positive policy change is going to occur, then we have to resolve ourselves to working within one of the two major political parties. That said, we do not have to accept the Republican Party as it exists today. Political parties are merely infrastructure. They're tools, they're a means to an end. And that end is constantly being redefined by the people who choose to involve themselves in the party process. If we want a Republican Party that better upholds the principles of liberty, then the responsibility to change this party rests with us, not with anyone else. Not with Chairman Downey, not with Rins Priebus, not with John Boehner, or John Klein, or Eric Paulson, or even Tom Emmer. And I know that may be a controversial point, so allow me to elaborate on it for just a moment. Unfortunately, I am now officially a politician. As such, I can attest to a truth that you already know, but that you're probably not used to hearing a politician say. And that's this. Once someone becomes a candidate, no matter how well they articulated principle before, No matter how vigorously they contended for liberty up to that point, they are no longer a pure agent of change. Candidates are agents of one thing and one thing only: their election. Similarly, incumbents are agents of one thing and one thing only: their re-election. Likewise, we can complain about this, or we can recognize that there's no other way for politicians to be. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their donors and volunteers to run winning campaigns. They're also putting their own time and money into the effort, and rightfully don't want to squander it. What this means is, with very few exceptions, the politician is always going to lean heavy on rhetoric and light on real change. Because real change creates political enemies. Recognizing this, we must note that the responsibility to change the party and push for policy rests with the activists and the delegates to apply pressure to the politician. If indeed the driving force in the politician's life is election and re-election, then the only means to reverse the effects of atrophy.
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri upstage.
That was one of our other politicians.
Trying to get the time up, sorry.
Glad you took that out. I thought Asa said enter the room.
Excuse me.
But if in fact the motivation for candidates is to win their election, for incumbents is to get reelected, then that is the pressure point. And we are the ones who, we can't blame them for acting in their nature, right? Or I should say us, unfortunately, at this point. We can't blame a politician for acting in their nature. Use that nature. Apply pressure. That's the only way we're going to be able to get the change that we're looking for. So moving forward, Neil and I see the role of the Republican Liberty Caucus as a steward of the Republican Party brand. Our job is to project what it means to be Republican. And by that, I don't mean what it means to be a liberty activist within the Republican Party. I mean what it means to be a Republican, period. First and foremost, being a Republican means standing firmly upon the principle of individual rights. It means advocating for government which fulfills its proper role of protecting individual rights. And it means fighting to not just limit the size and scope of government, but to proactively advocate for freedom on all fronts. To have a positive policy agenda that protects people's rights. Ideally, there would be no need for a Republican Liberty Caucus. The party's candidates, incumbents, and officers would each echo and fulfill this mission, and the term Republican Liberty would become redundant. Unfortunately, we're a long way from that point. In the meantime, we need this organization and others who share similar goals to work tirelessly in pursuit of liberty. Let me close by suggesting a means by which we can accomplish this. I've been listening to a lot of Cato podcasts lately, which I highly recommend. There's very few venues where you can catch libertarians debating libertarians about how to do freedom better, and Cato is one such venue. A recent Cato podcast I was listening to elaborated on the odd alliance between bootleggers and Baptists during Prohibition. Here you had two very distinct interest groups who in any other circumstance would be opposed to each other. But in the case of Prohibition, their interests aligned. The moralizing Baptists who wanted to restrict alcohol consumption found common cause with the bootleggers who wanted to benefit from a black market. A similar alliance manifests between the Christian Coalition and Native American casinos in 2005. This was part of the broader Jack Abramoff scandal that you no doubt recall, wherein it was revealed that some tribes had paid Abramoff to lobby against other tribes who wanted to open casinos. And again, this was an odd alliance between people who on the one hand objected to gambling on principle and others who made gambling their business. The point to take away from the Baptist and bootleggers phenomenon is that political coalition can coalesce even between interest groups who have vastly different core ideologies. This is something that we can and must utilize. The Republican Liberty Caucus for Minnesota has joined Liberty Minnesota in a broad bipartisan coalition to advocate for the restoration of voting rights to parolees living among us in the community. These are people who have been deemed safe to release into the community. They're no longer incarcerated, they hold jobs, they pay taxes, they raise families, and they abide by the law. The RLC's advocacy on this issue has put us in the same room with groups that you would never expect us to otherwise be on the same side of an issue of. Groups like Take Action Minnesota, Common Cause, Second Chance Coalition. By doing so, we've been able to demonstrate to a constituency outside the choir that the principles of liberty are universal. These principles do not belong to the Republican Party. They don't even belong to the liberty movement. They belong to anyone, any man or woman, from every background who seeks to live free. The Republican Liberty Caucus stands uniquely poised to foster a competition both within and without the party towards liberty. Imagine a Democratic Party that competed with Republicans to see which could better uphold individual rights. Join us in that race toward freedom. Join us in setting an example which the rest of our party and indeed the rest of the nation can follow. Thank you.